my mom, Meredith, asked as she buckled my baby sister into her travel seat. I picked up the diaper bag and my tiny lion stuffed animal, which was my absolute favorite. That little lion and I went everywhere together. We were getting ready to go see my great-grandfather.
I have everything, Mommy. I even have Jenny's diaper bag and Larry Lyon's too.
I loved going to my great-grandfather's house. He lived in such a large, beautiful white colonial with black shutters on each of the windows, and it sat on a massive piece of property which seemed to go on forever. I wasn't sure if it was because I was only 3 years old back then and everything seemed oversized, or if it actually did. In his backyard was my tiny hideaway spot tucked behind a small patch of bushes and trees, where a picnic table stood on top of a floor made of substantially large inlaid stones. I would go to the table a lot to enjoy the sweet fragrance of the honeysuckle bushes and the mimosa trees that I had to pass through. They all seemed to be magical somehow whenever my great-grandfather appeared. "Let's get into the car. Are you sure you're ready?" Mom's voice broke into my daydream and brought me back to our trip.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I've got everything, Mommy.
We got into the car. It was a big green Rambler with an extremely loud engine, which always made me jump whenever it started. I sat in the front seat next to my mom, with Jenny, my baby sister, in her car seat safely secured in the back. My mom came around to the driver's side and took her position before she put the key in the ignition. "Here we go," she said as I covered my ears to prepare for the great big roar of the car engine that I knew was inevitable. As always, I jumped, and my mom chuckled at my reaction before she told me, "Hold on to Larry, he sounds a bit fierce today." We pulled out of the driveway of our home. It was a small ranch-style house with 2 bedrooms. My mom was doing the best she could to raise us. My father, Alex, left her with 2 children and no money. I had always thought it was my fault for his departure, because I was the one who told my mom my father was with another woman, and I also informed her that I saw him kissing the woman. But my mom never made me feel guilty in any way. She insisted it would have been someone else that told her if I hadn't. The scent in the air was delightful as we drove down the road. I could smell all the deliciously sweet late summer flowers in bloom as their perfume filled the air. I rolled the window down a little more and I leaned closer to allow the fragrance and warmth to fill me. I looked over at my mom. She was beautiful. The sun caught the strawberry highlights in her dark blonde hair and danced in her light blue eyes as they sparkled when she looked down at me with a smile. I looked over at my 6-month-old sister, Jenny, to make sure she was okay. She was sitting in the back seat with her teething ring in hand, shaking it up and down and making cooing sounds as she did. Jenny was cute, with her small button nose, porcelain white skin, and bright blue eyes. Her hair was coming in the same color as my mom's. I had to admit, I was always jealous of that fact. I was the only person in our family who had dark brown hair and green eyes. Sometimes I felt incredibly out of place whenever we had our family get-togethers, as I sat around a bunch of tall blondes with blue eyes. I felt like such an outsider, like I didn't belong. Of course, they never made me feel that way. I always just felt different. We were on the parkway, headed east toward the tall hill on our island, Long Island. It appeared to be more of a mountain to me, at that time. On the top of the hill stood a towering monument in the middle of the parkway, which looked like a flag on a pole with no wind blowing. I was watching my mom's hair flutter in the wind when all of a sudden Mom's appearance changed as she looked into the rearview mirror. I knew something was wrong. Very wrong. "Get down. Tuck yourself under the seat and tell Larry to make lots of roars. We're going to need it to get up this hill." Her voice was shaking as she spoke. I didn't know what was going on, but the look on Mom's face told me not to question her, so I did as I was instructed to do. I got down low on the floor, pulled my knees up to my chest, and held Larry real tight. I could hear the roar of the engine as it strained while we proceeded to the monument. It was such an old car, and whenever we made the trip, the hill was always a struggle to get over. Mom turned to look to her left. She shouted out her window, "Leave us alone! You have no right to be following us!" Suddenly, the Rambler jerked to the right and caused me to rock into the middle divider of the car. The vehicle did it again with an amazingly loud crunch sound, which forced my head to crash into the same wall. "Casey, get down further. Tuck yourself into a ball and keep close to the center," she told me. Again, I did as she instructed. My fear only intensified, which made my heart pound so hard in my chest. I couldn't tell what had caused our car to react as it did. I could hear my mom's breath increase and saw her eyes narrow as we made the trip up the hill to the monument at the top. "Alex, what are you trying to do? Kill us?" My mom screamed out the window. "It was my father. But why?" Panic raced through my veins as my heartbeat increased with each minute. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Please make it stop, please make it stop," was all I thought to myself as I repeated it over and over again in my head and concentrated on each word to calm myself. The crunch sound came again and again, causing the car to veer to the right and me to slide further to the center of the Rambler's floor. My sister started to cry loudly, as only a baby could. I didn't even remember she was in the back seat until she cried. The look of terror in my mom's eyes as she glanced down at me sent shivers down my spine. I wanted so much to check on my sister, to make sure she was safe. I wanted it to stop. I couldn't move. My fear was so great that it seemed to grab hold of me, locked me into position, and kept me frozen in time. I couldn't speak, couldn't scream. "We're almost to the top, girls. Hang on, this will all be over soon." She took a deep breath. "He'll have to stop at the police station there." Her last statement was spoken so low that I thought it was meant more for her benefit than for mine. My father must have known about the police, too, because our car no longer lurched in odd directions as we got closer to the top. "Keep down, Casey," she told me. "We're going to the monument's parking lot. Don't move until we get there." When we finally reached our destination at the top of the hill, the car stopped and the roar of the engine was turned off. Mom looked at my sister and me quickly. "Are you two okay?" she said. "Anything hurt?"
"No, I think I'm good," I told her while I made my way up and onto the chair. "Why was Daddy trying to kill us?"
I asked as I saw the panic was still in her eyes. I was more afraid of what had just happened to us than how I felt. I just couldn't comprehend why our father would have done such a thing. She got us out of the car and thoroughly examined us. "I'm just glad we're all safe," she told me while holding Jenny, just before she looked over to the monument. The officer, who stood by his car, took a good look at my mom. He must have seen the look of terror in her eyes and ours, or it could have been the mangled side of the car which grabbed his attention. Or perhaps it could have been both that sent him immediately over to us. He towered over my mom, and was very muscular with a broad build. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked. His voice was as rugged as he looked. "I need to make a phone call," my mom said as she shook from head to toe. He brought us up to his car and allowed her to use the cruiser phone. "Grandpa, he's after us. Can you please pick us up at the monument?" After a short pause, she said, "Thank you." Why was he after us? I couldn't fathom why my father had turned into such a monster, or who would want to hurt us like he had attempted to do. It didn't make any sense. She followed the officer, with my sister held tightly in her arms, while I sat in the back seat of the cruiser. They were standing by my mom's car, and he had what looked like a pad which he whipped out of his pocket. As my mom explained what had happened, he jotted down lots of notes. I would have loved to know what she had told him. I wanted to be right next to her to hear it. My great-grandfather had arrived remarkably fast, and stood right at my mom's side with his hand placed gently on her shoulder. She turned and started to cry against his chest. He was so much taller than her, with a full head of light gray hair. He was also slim, like most of the members of my family. My great-grandfather held her hand and kissed her forehead right before he took my sister from her. She took a deep breath before she continued to speak with the officer, who wrote more intently on his pad to make sure he didn't miss anything. The officer, my great-grandfather with my sister in his arms, and my mom came over to the cruiser. Right before he opened the door, my mom took my sister from my great-grandfather. "How are you? You're not hurt, are you?" my great-grandfather asked as he examined me. I shook my head in response. He took my hand and picked me up. "Come on, my little munchkins, let's get you home." He drove us all back to his incredible house. The smell of honeysuckles that grew in his backyard stimulated my senses. My aunt, uncle, and my grandparents greeted us outside as we arrived. All of them were very tall and slim, with blonde hair and blue eyes. It was funny, but the moment I saw them all, the fear I felt a moment ago seemed to have gone away. I took a deep breath and ran to them. "Wow, you grew since I last saw you. How old are you now? Are you 8? My uncle teased. He was always good at cracking jokes at just the right time. I giggled as I ran into the house and stopped in the sitting area, took a deep breath, and relaxed once I got a whiff of the delicious smell of cherry tobacco that my great-grandfather always smoked. His lit pipe sat on the ashtray by his chair. He must have left the minute he got off the phone with my mom. I was so thankful for having such a loving family. My great-grandfather followed me into the house while my mom remained outside with my aunt and uncle and spoke about the event. My mom held Jenny so close to her in her arms. Jenny had stopped crying and appeared much happier with her teething ring in hand and her eyes wide with excitement as she looked at my aunt. "Come with me. We're going to go out to our magical place." My great-grandfather bent down and whispered to me. I knew what he was talking about, our place, my little hideaway from everything. We walked through the grand center hall and over to the French doors. They were the entrance to his fantastic garden. I opened the doors and glanced at my great-grandfather. He was such a gentleman, full of life and just so fun to be around. I looked back into the garden and could see our special place in his beautiful backyard, behind the small cluster of trees and bushes, which resembled a tiny forest and stood off in the distance. He bent down to me and whispered into my ear, "I'll race you." He looked at me with a grin from ear to ear. "Ready? On your mark, get set, go!" I ran right to our garden and sat under the picnic table, out of breath, and waited for him to come out through the forest of trees. I couldn't see him. Is he coming? Where did he go? I thought to myself, and then I felt his hand on my shoulder. When I turned around, he was on his knees behind me with a great big smile on his face. "I think it was a tie," he said, as he gave me a wink. "I can't get under the table anymore, but I did get here when you did. You just couldn't see me." I giggled. He went over to his magical garden, as he liked to call it. With me by his side, he pulled off a honeysuckle flower and held it out to me. "It's a little candy from the heavens. Take out the long strand and taste it." I studied him curiously.
"But it's a flower. How can it be candy?"
"Trust me," he responded. "Not everything is as it seems, Casey." Curious, I did as he directed me, took the long stem of the center flower out, and began to suck on it. Sure enough, it was so sweet, like honey, with a hint of a floral flavor. It was a taste that I will always remember. I looked at him with surprise, and he smiled in response. He walked over to the mimosa tree, which stood not much taller than my grandfather and was covered entirely in perfect little pink puffballs. It was my favorite tree, and it wasn't just because of the unusual flowers. It had much more to do with the fact that my great-grandfather made it so. "Close your eyes and make a wish," he whispered into my ear. I studied him for a second. He gave me a soft little grin before I closed my eyes tightly and made the wish he had taught me.
"I wish for a special coin," I whispered to myself.
Just then I heard the clink of the coin the second it hit the stone of the patio. I knew it just happened, and opened my eyes immediately with a big smile on my face. I glanced up at my great-grandfather, and he, too, had a smile from ear to ear. Somehow, whenever my great-grandfather stood next to it, money would fall from the tree.
"Wow, magic!" I said, looking at him with amazement.
"I couldn't do it without you, Casey. You willed it to happen, and I helped it appear. It's because of you that magic happens," he said with a glimmer in his eyes. I couldn't help being shocked by his statement.
"Me? But how?"
He reached over and kissed me on my forehead. "Just believe, and you will see the magic happen. It's inside of you. In time you will see, but always believe." I picked up the large coin from the patio floor and stared at it. I wanted nothing more than to be able to focus on the coin. However, what happened in the car was still lingering in my thoughts.
Why would Daddy want to do those things to us? Why would he want to hurt our car? What was he trying to do?
"Wow, that's a lot of questions," my great-grandfather said. He brought his hand to my face and brushed my cheek with his thumb. "Come and sit next to me." We walked over to the bench of the picnic table, and I sat right next to him. I fiddled with the coin in my hand and focused my attention on him. The look of worry was written all over his face. "We don't know why people do what they do," he told me. "No one would want to hurt you if they knew what a special gift you are. Sometimes people go through life not seeing, not looking, and making bad choices. Today was a bad choice, but you're safe now. You're all safe now, and we'll take care of things. Always remember to believe. Good things will come, even from the bad. They will see the wrong in what they did, but you must look to the future and know that this was just a moment of your life and you will grow from what just happened. Don't let it hurt you, Casey. We won't let it hurt you. You just need to believe in yourself." I observed him, still very confused, and even more so after his statement.
"Huh?"
He gazed into my eyes and held my hand. "Don't worry, you'll understand in time." Just remember to believe, like you just did in our magic garden. You can make things happen, good things. You just have to believe. Come, let's go inside." He stood up from the bench. I followed, still baffled by everything, and held even tighter to the coin in my hand. "I want you to try something. Just believe. Can you do that?" I nodded in response. "Good," he said. We walked through the grand garden up to the French doors to the house. As we peered inside through the door's windows, I saw everything as they gathered in the middle of the great hall. They were all deep in conversation with each other. My mom still had Jenny in her arms, and Jenny studied the necklace my mom had around her neck, and held it in her little tiny hands. They all seemed so concerned and deep in thought, except for Jenny. She was involved with her new shiny discovery. "Let's try out your magic, Casey. I bet you can make everyone smile," my great-grandfather said with a smile. I glanced at them and back at him. His bet seemed like an impossible goal. "How?" I asked. "Magic, Casey. It's inside of you. Try to focus on making everyone smile when you go inside. Keep the vision in your head and show them the result of our magic trick. It will work, trust me. You just have to believe in you." I walked through the large French doors into the house and stood in the great hall. Everyone was still deep in conversation. My great-grandfather closed the door behind him with a loud thud, which caught me off guard and made me jump a little. Everyone turned around at the noise. "Casey has something to show you all. Go ahead, Casey," he announced to everyone. I took a deep breath and held up the large silver coin hesitantly and said, "It's magic!" And everyone smiled at me. I couldn't help but smile back. Did I do that? Could I really be magic? I thought to myself. "Cool," I said, as I looked up at my great-grandfather, who stood just to my side with an enormous grin on his face. "It's magic, Casey. You just have to believe," he whispered to me with a wink.